What if I told you that Ferrari discovered something hidden in Hamilton's car that could change his entire season? And that they've been hiding it until it was too late? Everything fell apart in an instant. The 2025 Brazilian Grand Prix at the iconic Interlagos circuit was going to be just another difficult date for Ferrari, marked by ineffective strategies, lack of pace, and unfulfilled promises. But that Sunday, something much more serious was brewing beneath the surface. Lewis Hamilton, in his third race with the Scuderia, not only experienced one of the most chaotic weekends of his career, but also starred in the exact moment in which the technical truth about his car was brutally exposed. Since Saturday, the signs were worrying. He qualified in an unusually low position for his standard, 13th. But Ferrari once again tried to minimize the damage with strategic optimism. For the Italian team, everything depended on a good start, good tire management, and some luck. There was nothing of that. The first round was an absolute disaster. In turn 1, Carlos Sainz, now a Williams driver, touched the side of Hamilton's SF25 abruptly. A minor collision, but one that completely destabilized the car. And just a few seconds later, already on the main straight, a second blow sealed his fate. Franco Colapinto's Alpine could not avoid it and hit him in the front, tearing off the front wing and severely damaging the flat bottom of the Ferrari. A double contact that not only ruined his career, but revealed something much deeper. From the pits, the initial reaction was cold, almost robotic. Technical emergency protocols were activated, data was reviewed, losses were calculated. Ferrari estimated a loss of between 35 and 40 points of downforce. In practical terms, that means the car lost more than a second per lap, turning an elite car into a machine impossible to drive with precision. The steering was unstable, the car floated in fast corners, the rear axle was erratic, and the tire temperature skyrocketed. On lap 37 of 71, Frédéric Vasseur, visibly frustrated, made one of the toughest decisions a team manager with a star driver can make: retire the car. His argument was clear. It made no sense to continue compromising an engine that was already overheated, in a race in which Hamilton was running in last position with no possibility of a comeback. But behind that logical justification there was another, much more disturbing truth. The engineers in Maranello were already seeing strange things. The data did not add up. Damage sustained after impacts did not fully explain the lack of stability and overall poor performance. And it was at that point that the most important technical autopsy Ferrari has faced in the modern era began. A thorough analysis of the SF25, not as a crashed car, but as a potentially flawed design. This moment marked a before and after. The race in Brazil was not just an accidental abandonment. It was the breaking point. The exact point where Ferrari stopped wondering if its car had problems, and began to discover that perhaps the entire technical concept of the SF25 was built on decisions that should never have been made. Hamilton's withdrawal in Brazil was not just the consequence of a double impact. It was the catalyst that uncovered a much more complex and alarming reality. With the car back in the paddock, Maranello engineers began a thorough inspection, not only to assess the damage from the accident, but to understand why, even before the crashes, the car behaved as if it were on the verge of breaking down. What they discovered not only worried them, it horrified them. Over the next few hours, the telemetry data began to paint a pattern that had gone unnoticed for weeks. The SF25's braking system, especially on Hamilton's car, was operating dangerously close to its maximum thermal threshold. The heat generated during braking was not dissipated as it should, and this compromised the response of the brake-by-wire system, the same one that coordinates electronic braking in conjunction with the energy regeneration of the MGUK, the hybrid engine responsible for recovering kinetic energy. Brazil did not forgive that makeup. Interlagos was surgical in its punishment. Demanding, brutal, impossible to deceive. And then the inevitable moment arrived. Vasseur received the final report. It was all there. The detailed description of the failures, the extreme temperatures, the floor flexing, the loss of structural control in the rear axle, the intermittent energy recovery failure. All summed up in a single conclusion. The SF25 was fundamentally unstable. The reaction was instantaneous. Frustration. A mixture of disbelief and suppressed rage. Not because the car failed, but because it had done so from the beginning without anyone clearly raising the alarm. The engineers knew. The pilots sensed it. But the team structure had preferred to maintain the narrative that everything was under control. Until it wasn't anymore. And in Formula One, the car must not only be fast, it must be predictable, reliable. Hamilton had been betrayed by a car that, race after race, made him feel like he was racing on thin ice. A slight vibration, a miscalculated braking, and everything would fall apart. The magic of ground effect was transformed into chaos. Vasseur knew he couldn't go on like this. The car had to change. But doing so meant admitting a public technical failure. A suspension redesign, floor reconfiguration, and mid-season structural adjustments would mean not only a massive budget deviation, but also a public assumption that the SF25 project, as conceived, had failed. That was the moment when the Ferrari director understood that his war in 2025 would not be against McLaren, nor Red Bull, nor Mercedes. His real battle would be internal. Against decisions that were made behind closed doors. Against errors that were covered with patches. Against a technical concept that was born defective, and that now threatened to destroy not only the season, but the reputation of the most historic team in Formula One. The discovery of Brazil was not simply a bitter conclusion to a disastrous weekend. It was an emergency call. A breaking point that forced Ferrari to face an uncomfortable truth that it had avoided since the season began. 4 months, the team had tried to justify its inconsistencies with external factors. Track conditions, bad luck, traffic in qualifying, questionable strategic decisions, or even Hamilton's adaptation to the car. But what happened at Interlagos eliminated any room for excuses. The faults were within the SF25, and they were there from the beginning. At that time, Ferrari found itself at a technical and emotional crossroads. On the one hand, they had to assume that the concept they had proudly defended in front of the press, the fans and their own drivers, was much more fragile than what was publicly shown. On the other hand, they had to start deciding what to do with that information. Redesigning a car in the middle of the season is not a simple matter of will. It is a challenge that involves budget, wind tunnel hours, human resources, and, above all, identity. Every profound change in a car is a risk. A leap into the void. For Hamilton, this revelation meant that he had not only been fighting against his rivals, he had been fighting his own machine. And that changes everything. It changes your mindset, your confidence, and your expectation. A driver who comes to Ferrari driven by the hope of fighting for titles again cannot afford a car that breaks down from the inside. Brazil marked the exact point where Hamilton stopped wondering why he couldn't find the rhythm, and started asking what they were giving him to drive. For Leclerc, the impact is also profound. Because although his car did not present flaws as visible as Hamilton's, the root of the design was the same. The same components. The same architecture. The same vulnerability. Both pilots were sharing a weapon whose stability depended on factors they could not control. That breaks the trust not only of the driver with the car, but of the driver with the team. And for Vasseur, this situation represents the biggest challenge since arriving in Maranello. Brazil was not just a bad result. It was the palpable demonstration that the technical project of the year had been sustained on a weak foundation. His immediate reaction inside the garage revealed a mix of disappointment and determination. He was aware that what the engineers revealed was not an isolated failure. It was a sign that the team had to make tough decisions. Decisions that could redefine the direction of the car, the season, and the leadership itself within Ferrari. Starting in Brazil, the narrative changes. The question is no longer whether Ferrari can fight McLaren or Red Bull. The question is whether Ferrari can rebuild itself in time to save 2025. Whether it can accept that its concept needs a deep fix, even if that means sacrificing immediate development in favor of long-term stability. If you can assume that Hamilton will only be able to perform at his best with a car whose structure does not betray him at every corner. And if you can admit that, this time, the battle will not be against your competitors, but against the limits of your own design. Every season has a turning point. A moment in which a team stops being reactive and begins to transform its weaknesses into decisive decisions. For Ferrari, that moment seems to have come, not in a podium, not in a victory, but in an accident in Brazil that exposed the truth that no one wanted to see. The path they decide to take now will define not only the future of the SF25, but the future of Hamilton dressed in red, the future of Leclerc within the Scuderia, and, ultimately, the future of Vasseur himself as the leader of a team that has been trying to return the team to glory for a few years. Let me know in the comments what you think about all this.